Hello, we're here today to review Blucher, one of a set of rule sets we've played now for 10 years, Greg.
We were just marveling a moment ago. We're 10 years late on this review.
Right. And it's a game we've played a lot of scenarios for.
Over 10 years. I mean, we played a Blucher scenario just last month, so We're still going strong on this game.
Yeah, I remember when it was coming out, and we were prepping and discussing and building our armies, and it's actually one of my best collections as far as like consistent and the number of nations I cover. So yeah, it's a fun rule set. I think it's given us a lot of good returns.
Well, even though we're 10 years late, we're ready to finally bring you our long overdue review of Blucher, published in 2015 by Sam Mustafa through his company Honor Games. This is a big battle Napoleonic system where one base represents an entire brigade. As always here on Little Wars TV, Tom and I are going to go through 5 review categories that you can see on the screen. They're weighted a little bit differently. It's been like a year since we've done a review here on Little Wars TV, so Tom and I may be a little bit rusty, but why don't we go ahead and get started with our first category, 10% of the overall score we're about to give, presentation.
Yeah, so presentation, I think for a lot of Sam's works, pretty clear. His exposition is crisp. Here's the format. I do actually like the size.
Me too.
It's a great rule size. So I think the presentation, I give it a 10. I think from
10.
Front to back, it's a solid. It's hard to ding him. He has an index. He has good organization. I do think, compared to what's on the market, I think this is a very solid 10.
Yeah, I mean, you can get it as a PDF. You can also get it in this beautiful hardback. I know that recently, within the last year, Sam in Honor Games, he's shifted to a print-on-demand model. So to be honest, I'm not sure if you order a print copy today, I don't know if it's the same quality hardback that we got 10 years ago. But I agree with everything you said. I'm going 9 out of 10. I'm almost there. Sam's games are always very clearly written. I love the fact that he sprinkles design notes and author commentary throughout all of his games. He never uses 3 sentences when he can get away with 1. It's a very tightly, professionally edited book. Only complaint, and it's a minor one, is that it's not like the sexiest looking graphic design we've ever seen.
Well, that's true.
It's very plain. He has illustrations, he has examples. There are some very nice pictures. But we've seen some probably, sexier looking books than this, so I guess I'll take a point off.
Okay.
All right, let's get to playability. This is a much more significant category for us, 30% of the overall score. How easy is it to get this on the table? How easy is it to teach somebody how to play and to get through a game?
Yeah, so playability, I guess is it relative to any gaming situation, relative to Napoleonics?
I'd say relative to other big battle Napoleonic games. Yeah. How does it compare to them?
Yeah, so I think the playability is pretty good. There's a commitment, obviously, a certain number of bases, but look, you can get cards that take their 3-inch wide cards and they have all the stats on them, and you can play with that on the table. So you could acquire the cards and play very quickly, and I think have a pretty good game while you're building the rest of your armies. Now, we went 6 mil on ours.
Yeah.
And I thought, you probably need 20 each side of those to do a lot of medium-sized
With about 20
battles.
bases, you could play a pretty good battle per side. 20 bases per side.
Yeah, so playability, I give it an 8 for that reason, for those things. I think it's pretty easy to get going on it.
So I would love to know, I don't give a lot of 10s, and it's been a long time since we've done a review, but I'm going 10 out of 10 on playability. And I would like to ask you why you only scored it an 8, which is a very high score, because when I think about big battle Napoleonic games, how could it... I don't know what game I would tell you to get into that's easier to get into than Blucher. You don't need a lot of bases, which is rare for Napoleonics, which means you don't need a lot of figures. The game is scale agnostic. Whatever size miniatures you want to put on your base is totally fine. He offers the cards through Drive-Thru RPG. You don't even need the miniatures. As you said, he sells beautiful custom cards that can act as your units. The game is easy to teach. You can play a whole battle in an evening. He's got a pretty nice QRS in the back that I think gives you just about everything you need in order to, show someone how to play the game. It'd be a good convention game. I it's rare I have no complaints, but like I don't know what I would complain about.
Yeah, perhaps I'm being a little jaded here in the sense of everything seems to take a lot more effort than it should. But you're right, you make some good points, as you said about the cards, and the rules are pretty clear. So yeah, I could see where you'd end up with a 10.
All right, let's get into what I think could be a little bit more interesting category where maybe we won't agree as much, and that's mechanics. Let me give you a real quick overview of how a turn works in Blücher, and then we can talk about some things maybe we like or don't like about the mechanics of the game. You start the game, and the real centerpiece of this is it's a command and control game. You roll for momentum. So you're making a die roll to see how much stuff is going to get to go. We're going to come back to momentum in a minute because it's a very interesting mechanic. And then it becomes an I go you game. So one side's going to activate and move as much of their stuff as they can based on that momentum roll. They're going to resolve all their movement, their shooting, their combats, and then it's going to flip over to the other side for them to go. So it is a turn-based game where you're just going back and forth, back and forth. And within your phase of the turn, movement, shooting, combat, it is all very simply resolved with a handful of six-sided dice. Right. The mechanics of the game are actually very simple. Let's talk specifically about that momentum mechanic, because that's a real centerpiece.
Yeah, no, I love that. So the idea is your opponent rolls your allowed momentum dice, 3d6 usually.
Or maybe 4 in a big game.
Depends on the size of the battle or if you've got reinforcements coming later. You check your total that you've moved every time you switch to a new division core. Right. And then they'll let you know if you've exceeded that number. So it gives you the ability to do things, but you never know when your turn's going to end. So you have to prioritize what you want to do the most, and then if you're lucky or average, you can move some other things. So I think for a very good friction and lack of clarity on what you can possibly accomplish in a turn, it's a very elegant way of achieving it.
I love the momentum system. Yeah, it can get a little bit swingy, of course. If your opponent rolls really low for you, you might have a turn where you get to do very little. I mean, you might only move a small portion of your army, but over time, over the battle, that's going to average out. Right. Your luck will average out. And it does give you that variability each turn where there's a tension as you're moving your cores. You're like, is this the last thing I'm going to be able to do this turn? Because it might be. Right.
And then he gets one where suddenly he can move everything.
Right.
But it really does create a lot of good tension.
Yeah, that part of the game I love. I'm also a big fan of the way movement is handled in Blucher. It's fairly rigid, which for a big battle Napoleonic system I don't have a problem with. I say it's rigid, but it's also easy. You're allowed to pivot a base, which remember is an entire brigade. You get a free pivot at the start of your movement, and then you move in a straight line. That is it, which takes away a lot of the finickiness, I think, of how movement might be resolved. It's very clear. Pivot, straight move. Now, if you want to do something special, if you want to retrograde or sidestep or move in a weird way, you can do that. It's just a half move. So
difficult move. So
it's called a difficult move. It's half of your normal movement rate. I love the simplicity involved in that.
I do too, because you need the rigidity. Right.
This is not a skirmish game.
But then you start getting, well, is it a degree thing if I turn more than 45 or 90? And it's just like, no, don't worry about that. If you get one free pivot, it could be 350.
And then you go straight.
Yeah, I think it works very well. Yes. It does make you consider your angles of attack and lining up units and making sure you're where you want to be, but it doesn't overcomplicate it.
All right, here's where I'm going to have a couple complaints. The combat mechanics, to me, I do have a little bit of an issue. It's not that they're complicated. They're actually quite simple. You roll a number of six-sided dice, and you're looking for sixes, right? Sixes are hits. There are circumstances, limited, thankfully, where you could hit on a 5. If you've got a bonus for any reason in shooting or combat. So, very, very simple. My problem with the combat mechanics in all of the many games of Blücher we've played is that the units feel extremely brittle.
Yes.
Your average unit in Blücher has 6 hit points. And that's also the number of dice that you get to roll in shooting and in combat. So if you're at full strength, you're going to get to roll your 6 dice. Well, 6 hit points is not a lot.
No.
And when you are the attacker in a combat, if you lose or draw, the mechanics say you take 2 hits automatically. The defender's always going to take a hit as well in combat. Everyone leaves combat with hits.
Right.
So effectively what that means is that over the course of a game, your brigade, if you're the attacker, probably can only afford to make 2 attacks before he's pretty much used up.
Yeah.
That feels very, very brittle to me.
Well, while I like the idea that, we think of how many attacks a brigade or whatever could put in, it's not unlimited.
No.
Right? But I agree. It presupposes you're going to have, like, reserves and keep rolling forward these attacks, which is great. It's just, as we know in games, it's often hard to pull that off cleanly, right? Your movement and where everybody is and stuff. So it would reward that. But I agree. Because I don't think you want to... There's a point in the game where the attacker, at least in the scenario, just can't attack anymore.
No.
And you'll see it with some players where they basically turtle down fairly quickly, and then you've got everybody's kind of trying to find... It becomes very static, I think. So I would prefer to that point, I would prefer it was less brittle to reward, few more attacks.
Right. I have one other complaint on the mechanics that is far more easily addressed than the last one, which I don't think there's a great solution for. There is a very meaningful bonus to garrisoning towns as the defender in this game, which makes it almost impossible to root anybody out of a village. Those things, it's like every village on the table is hegemon, which,
right,
again,
right.
having read accounts of this period, towns changed hands all the time. The scenario that we played on Christmas Day that's on our website, the Battle of Mala Yaroslavets in 1812, in that historical battle, that town changes hands like 6 or 8 times in a day. You would never see that in Blucher. I mean, that town may not change hands once the whole game.
Yeah, you've really got to stack up an attack.
You've got to load up,
yeah.
And every time you're repulsed in that attack,
right.
all the units involved are losing 2 hit points. So this one I think is a very easy fix. You just say, hey, look, towns don't have that bonus.
Right.
It's just it's rough ground, but there's no special garrison bonus. So, maybe that's a minor complaint. I mean, overall, talking about mechanics, they err on the side of simplicity, which for a big battle Napoleonic game, I'm okay with. The one place where they do add in some real meat is with that momentum system and how that's done. And I think in a big battle game, that's where you want the emphasis to be.
Yeah. Well, I think I agree with everything there. I think one of the mechanics, one of the things we have noticed, there is some subtlety but I think it's simple, and yet we've had some great battles with it. So, I think it's, I don't know where you are on mechanics, but I give it a 7.
7, okay.
Not, incredibly inventive, clever, and they work for the system.
I gave it an 8, so similar vein, and my only reservation about the mechanics at all is how punitive it is to be the attacker.
Right, we agree.
Which there's no great fix except for maybe designing a good scenario where you make sure the attacker has the necessary numerical advantage to be the attacker, knowing how hard it is in this game to kind of play that role.
Which is an interesting point because, we're pretty practiced in Napoleonic. So, for example, the base Blücher often talks about victory point locations like towns and, areas of the board, and we seldom play that because we're playing a historic scenario. But to that point, pay attention to the scenario. It'll probably help you figure out either what does victory look like, even if you're not specifically using little victory point locations.
Right.
But I agree, that's probably how you fix that.
Next category, 20% of the score, historical flavor. When you play a game of Blucher, do you feel like Napoleon? Do you feel like you're playing a big battle Napoleonic game?
On paper, I might not think so, given the simplicity, right, of some of the mechanics, but I do. We've had great battles and campaigns using it, and I always felt there's not a lot to do as the general, other than basically manage your momentum deals every turn, and there is an opportunity within the momentum. You can use a CNC move, which is essentially a turn-ending move, but put him where you want and can pick up a number of units around him and make a kind of decisive move there. So I think leadership could be more enhanced, as we've discussed, like what does the general do. But honestly, even for the simplicity, I do feel in all the battles we've played that it scratches the itch.
To me, this is the toughest category to score because it's one of those cases where you're like, am I grading on the curve or not?
Right.
And what I mean by that is that it's a big battle, fast play game.
Sure.
So that means there are going to be a lot of abstractions. A lot is going to be stripped out because how else are you going to play Waterloo in 3 or 4 hours? You're just not. This is a game that allows you to do that, which means that there are compromises that have to get made. And to me, the compromise that's made is that a lot of the flavor does get kind of stripped out of the game. I mean, I could just as easily be playing Blucher for pretty much any black powder period. There's nothing about it that's really Napoleonic other than the cover and the name. And I will admit that, sometimes it bothers me a little bit. I like the speed of the game, but I do wish that there were a few more nods to period flavor. I mean, one really obvious place for it is in the leaders. They're pretty much pointless in the game. Generals aren't even on the table unless you're using that follow me, end of momentum move. You put them on as a marker. I think it's absolutely essential if you're playing this game that you use the advanced rules in the back for leadership traits.
Yes.
He does have a chapter later that you don't have to use that offers a few kind of generic traits like, inspiring or brilliant that give your core commanders and your generals one characteristic. I think that is a nod in the right direction, and I wish that he had leaned a little bit more heavily into that for an army-level game. I mean, if I'm playing Waterloo, I want Ney and Napoleon to feel important.
Right.
They're not in this game.
Yeah, no, I think the leadership is an important one. And as you say, you can find a way to add some of it in. But yeah, and you question, like, on the combat, like, could that make a difference for some of those brittle units?
Right.
Right, like if you had the limited ability to use leaders to change the combat, I think that's an area that probably add more flavor. I get your point around, it's missing some key flavor points, but I just look at the experience, and I really have a lot of great experiences with playing some really big scenarios and wide-ranging, so I give it an 8. Okay. And I guess the way I put it is, there's nothing in these rules that prevents you from enhancing the flavor. It usually comes down to scenario.
Okay.
Right. Even down to some combats. I mean, remember Joe Colorado?
Yeah, I do actually, from like 8 years ago. Yeah.
I mean, it was
memorable as an inside joke of a campaign we played, but we both remember it very well.
The Danube campaign, just critical moments there. So I have good memories, so for that reason, I'll give it a nod there.
All right, I'm feeling slightly bad about my score. I gave it a 5, middling, totally average for historical flavor. I really struggled in this category. Maybe I should have bumped it up a hair, but, I've made my concerns well known at this point.
You've voiced them. So support is in terms of, are you on your own here, but is there community? Are there scenarios? Is there a forum, a place to go and get questions answered? And my feel on this is, the support's pretty good relative to what's out there. I mean, there's a fair number of scenarios, if not done by Sam and Honor themselves. There's a lot that have been adapted. He certainly gives you the support in terms of getting started in the game. I haven't been on the forum for a long time. I don't know how active that is. So I gave it an 8. I think it doesn't need a ton of support, but I think in terms of scenarios that are already adapted for Blucher, I can think there's a couple folks out there that have maybe a dozen.
I am a little bit harsher on support for one reason. I mean, let's start with the good. Sam has his own website. There are free downloads and game aids and FAQ information on his website. We'll put a link to that. So that's great. The game was very popular when it was released, and you would find a lot of people playing it. Obviously, in 10 years, that has trailed off considerably. You're not going to see a lot of Blucher games being run at conventions, which is a shame because we both really like the game. But that's just the passage of time. I don't fault it for that. My complaint is the scenarios that you mentioned. Today, 10 years later, you will find scenarios that third-party individuals, players like us, have adapted and written for Blücher. I was very frustrated when this game came out. Sam did not release historical scenarios for this. I believe there was one on the peninsula that he released. And you were just kind of on your own to figure out how to develop scenarios for this. And in the book, he does give you the tools that you would need to know how to build a scenario. But that was on you as a player to figure out orders of battle, what traits to give them, what strength points to give them. Like, you had to do that work. To me, that was a big miss. There really should be scenario books for this, because you can't play the Battle of Waterloo without having a Waterloo scenario. I mean, why wouldn't that be available? He did release at the beginning a 100 Days campaign.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like a 17-page PDF. Tells you how to link your battles together into this really cool, like, map-based campaign for the Waterloo campaign. And it's really well done. So you got the campaign manual, but not the orders of battle to play the campaign. Those were not available unless you bought the cards from Drive-Thru-RPG. Now, you, on your own, developed a fabulous Danube campaign, 1809 campaign that we referenced a minute ago, that we had a great time playing. One of the most successful campaigns we've ever run in the club. We got to completion. It was a great experience.
Great battles.
But that, to me, is the perfect encapsulation of why I wasn't crazy about the support for Blücher. You did all that on your own. You made the map. You did the orders of battle. You came up with the traits. I mean, you developed all of that.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, that's very clear. Sometimes I get fuzzy. I mean, that's what I like doing. Right. And
you and I both like writing scenarios.
So I'm always like, well, that's not that hard.
Right.
Meaning it's the fun part. But I get it.
But for a lot of people,
if your point is a fast play,
a lot of people don't like developing scenarios the way that you and I do. And if you don't like researching, developing, playtesting, and writing scenarios, then you were kind of out of luck with Blücher.
Yeah, you're right.
So, Tom, we get to our final summary of the review and our scores. My weighted score turns out to be a 79. Which in our system is a game we would strongly recommend that you play. It's a high score.
Well, we got there differently, but I also got to 79.
We did not collude.
No collusion. Although I may have been convinced by some of your points over the course of this, but both 79 solid scores.
Yeah.
We definitely recommend it.
Absolutely.
It's a great system. You'll have a lot of fun with it.
Absolutely. We will put links in the description for where you can go to get Sam's website, to find a copy of Blücher. We'll also put links to a couple of scenarios that we developed and wrote here in the club over the years. So if you're looking to get started with a historical scenario, you can go and you can check that out.